Good afternoon. Lovely weather, another 15 centimeters of snow, and it's not even winter yet. Anyhow, I just got passed an email from the Honorable Dominique LeBlanc, of a federal minister, and I've actually Intergovernmental Affairs and Northern Development, one of the new ministries or departments, in response to our queries why our nation wasn't invited to the meeting in Ottawa with respect to the national Aboriginal leaders. It appears that they only invite those political lobbyist groups that they control and fund. The AFN, which is controlled by the federal government. Justice Department regulates everything within inside the AFN. The Métis National Council, again, another not-for-profit political lobbyist group, I believe. I haven't looked up their corporation status at the moment, but I imagine they're a not-for-profit or a corporation. And the Inuit up in the north, which are now their own controlling interests through the Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. So they're part of the governmental structure of the North. What is interesting to note that under Supreme Court rules, corporations may have Aboriginal members, but they have no Aboriginal rights. So with Justin Trudeau's comments about resolving all the Aboriginal issues within his term, he's only dealing with political lobbyist groups that he actually controls through various mechanisms of the government. Now, I'm not questioning that these three groups aren't doing as best they can to affect some results for their membership, but when the purse strings are controlled by the government, you have to question the efficiency. And that's no disrespect to our brothers and sisters in those organizations, but sometimes you have to work with what you've got, and that's essentially what's happening. In our case, it appears that the government is still in adversarial positioning with respect to dealing with our nation. But that email today, I thought I'd just tell everybody that when you're looking at what your leaders are doing with respect to your Indigenous rights, you have to look beyond just blind faith and see what's happening. Now, I'm not questioning that the AFN or the Métis National Council are trying to do good works for their constituencies, and I guess that's what you call it, or members of the these little corporations or big corporation or whatever they are. All this stuff you have to take with a grain of thought, and really what I say is just for a matter of discussion points. You can do all the research yourself. But it's interesting that they only want to deal with those organizations that they fund. The ones that they're the communities, nations, whatever you want to call them, tribes, that have yet to surrender to the government of Canada. And there is a legal mandate both from the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, and also by the Daniels case reaffirming and ingraining the Royal Proclamation into the current law that you have to sign treaty with unsurrendered, unceded Aboriginal people. This is important information to know. Now, there was a YouTube video that I've misplaced on my list, that it was a lawyer for the United Nations subsequent to the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People talking in Papua New Guinea about the issue of colonial governments or countries, whichever way you want to phrase it. And I'll try to paraphrase what she said. She said that if any colonial government has taken the land of Indigenous people illegitimately, not signing treaty with them, they have to immediately repatriate those lands back to the Aboriginal people, or to be in violation of international law. Sometime when in the UN, when they were discussing Indigenous rights, going back to the 50s and the 60s. They started to look at this issue, and one of the results of that issue, and I forget which department, but there actually is an article, I think it was December 11, 2013. It's an article, I haven't got the information right in hand, but it was a decolonization policy or article, which it was approved at the UN, where colonial countries that are basically controlled by, say, Great Britain, they can decolonize if the population votes for that. And they referred a number, or they were referencing subsequently a number of communities in the Caribbean which were actually a financial drain on Britain, and they got independence. Again, that can be researched. But they didn't quote Canada. Obviously, Canada is a major resource sector, and they're going to be supporting the British Empire with some of the taxations and other contributions that Canada has to, under contract, file back to the UK. So there is an emphasis in the United Nations to actually recognize Indigenous rights. And those countries that want to get rid of those financial burdens now, where at one time they were financial benefits to the nation that was colonizing them, you can detach from Britain. So it begs the question, what's the status of Canada when Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau wanted a constitution brought back to this land? They were only negotiating with those already surrendered Aboriginal communities through the former name of the AFN, and I just forget it right now, and other groups that they already funded. The government didn't participate in public consultation with other Indigenous groups because at that time they didn't recognize Métis as being one of the Aboriginal people, and that was granted into the Constitution based on the efforts of the premier families out west, the Harper family, and some of the other Métis from Manitoba. And again, that's a huge topic to discuss how that came about, all in a good way. But it's very interesting. It appears by 2 weeks of discussions with the federal government right now, the approach of the federal government is only dealing with those Indigenous groups they've already, in a sense, conquered, controlled, and have legal authority over them through either the Corporations Act or through the administration of the Department of Justice. Lots of stuff is happening currently right now in Indigenous law, and there is only 2 Supreme Court decisions, unless a few have snuck through that I haven't noticed, which was the Polly's case, we can shoot a moose, or the Daniels case, which we are now Indians. The whole intent of the Daniels case from post-1982 was to get some definitive understanding of what the federal government believed our Indigenous rights were. In the grading of the Constitution with the Royal Proclamation, it says Aboriginal rights and treaty rights and any other rights that may come about in the future. Well, that becomes a negotiation factor, and also a bit of research to prove what your Indigenous culture and traditions and rights were back going to 1867, which is the current issue with the Daniels case. It's basically open up the barn door as respect to what are the rights of, for one, the Eastern Métis, which John A. Macdonald was supposed to, and the subsequent prime ministers were always supposed to resolve subsequent to the Manitoba Act. So I'm just trying to get my head together with all the many points, but that one was an interesting one today, so I thought I'd post it. The fact that it appears, I could be wrong, the government's only relationship with Indigenous people in Canada is those who are already surrendered. And it appears that Prime Minister Trudeau's election promise to resolve the Aboriginal issues is with a tough stick. I'm only dealing with the ones we've already controlled and they've already surrendered. So this is an alarming thought, concern. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm going to watch it very extensively and I'll report on it more later. But I thought everybody should know that from the discussions our community and some of our chiefs had with the federal government this week, is that they're only dealing with those, they have their own agenda and they're only dealing with those they already control. I was looking up on the internet on the legal position of the FN, and they're a corporation, or the one that controls their administration, the NIB, is I think it's NIB, is a corporation. It has a corporation number on Corporation Canada. You can search that. And I'll get more details later as I start to refine these discussion points. Anyway, have a great day, and I'm not an expert at doing these videos, and it's kind of fun actually to go forward in this way. This social media is, I guess, the up and coming thing, and we're going to enjoy it. And I've got an incoming call from the government, so I'll touch base with you all later. Have a great day.